Muted? No, I think it's fine, Kelvin. Thanks.
Okay,
I'll send you the final email, and then we can start.
Okay, thanks. This is Kelvin from the Secretariat team. I'm just wondering if we are now 3 minutes past the scheduled start. Let's see if we want to begin now, or shall we wait another couple of minutes or not?
I think it's best to begin, Kelvin, and we'll see who joins.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Do you introduce us, Kelvin, or do we just start?
You can go ahead, Walt. Maybe you introduce the speakers?
Yes, okay.
Okay.
That's the only thing that was not clear to me. Thank you.
No problem.
You can see me on the screen, I suppose. So to everybody present in this virtual meeting, very much welcome. I'm Wouter Natris. I'm speaking to you from Haarlem in the Netherlands. And I'm speaking as coordinator of the Dynamic Coalition of the UN IGF on Internet Standards, Security and Safety. With me are the two chairs or vice chairs of the working groups, and I hope the third will join shortly. They are from working group 1, Yuri Kargopolov from Ukraine, Janice Richardson, who's working from Luxembourg, who's in working group 2, and Mallory Nodo from the US, who's in working group 3. I've got a few slides for you. The first one, the second one introduces me, but I do not have to go into that deeply because you can read that. And the most important thing at this point is that I am the coordinator of this dynamic coalition. And the reason why we would like to introduce it to you is that it's a global program. And as you will see, is that it aims to make the internet more secure and safer. And that's the third slide, please. That is literally our motto, making the internet more secure and safer. And we have a few ways to try and get to that point within a couple of years. When I thought about this for the first time, what I noticed is that in cybersecurity discussions very, very often went about mitigation. There's an incident and then people start to respond to it and start to fix it. And whether that is with computer infections or intrusions, most of the efforts seem to go into mitigation. And I always thought we have thousands of standards available that would prevent the incident. And why is not that much attention put to that option? So what this dynamic coalition tries to do is to put existing ICT standards, internet standards and ICT best practices into action to make sure that they are deployed. And we do that through frameworks of cooperation that already exist. What's another discussion that I very often notice is that we talk about the theory of security on a daily basis. We should do this. We have to do that. But in practice, very often, devices, services, etc. from the internet are delivered to us insecure. So how can we close the gap between talking about security and the actual deployment of security into our services and devices and products? And the way that we aim to do that is through the wider and more effective and rapid deployment of these existing standards and best practices. And I will get to how we foresee to reach that goal within a couple of years very soon. The basis of this dynamic coalition is an IGF pilot project that was conducted in the year 2019 and led to a report early in 2020 with setting the standard to a more effective and safer internet. You can find that with the link that is provided in slide number 4. So next slide, please. So this is the link to the report. And next slide, please. Thank you. So in the report, we basically asked 2 questions to the world. And it was the answers were provided to us by way of surveys, a session we held at the IGF in Berlin in 2019, where dozens of people participated in a very interactive workshop, and by conducting interviews with people from all over the globe. We asked basically 2 questions. So why are internet standards and ICT best practices not widely and effectively deployed? And the second one, what can we do about it? So when we look at the answers that we received to the first question, there were of course numerous. But when we started to put them more or less together, we could come up with 4 different sort of answers, but they're all interconnected. So the deployment of these standards and best practices are usually voluntary. So in other words, there is no regulatory or legal pressure to deploy them. What is also the case that there was no business case. So when there's no demand for security in products and services and devices, there will also be no supply. Because when there's no demand, nobody pays for them. So why should industry bother to invest into a product that apparently nobody wants? And that creates a situation where there's no level playing field. So the few organizations that say, yes, I'm going to do this voluntarily, spend a lot more money on their products, so they make less profit, and probably their shareholders will start complaining to them. And so when there's no level playing field, there's actually the disincentive to deploy. And finally, there are few active drivers for change. So what it results to is that what in English history is called the tragedy of the commons. Is when a lot of people are responsible for something which is sort of owned by everybody. Usually almost nobody feels responsible for the whole. And that is something which is very clear at the internet, is that it's something huge that, let's be honest, more than 95% of the people do not understand. So there's also no comfort in working. There's no incentive to work on the security of the internet, and nobody feels responsible. So in other words, things just happen the way they happen at this point in time. But what can we do to change it? Next slide, please. So what are solutions? When we asked this to people, that it was a 75%, if I remember correctly, they said legislate and everything is solved. But 95% of the people said don't do this. It's an extremely bad idea. And why is that? Because probably the internet will disintegrate if everybody, from a country perspective, start their own legislation, because that would make innovation almost impossible. Also the working of the internet perhaps impossible, because the company can't keep in mind 195 something legislations from around the world. So that means that we're stuck between brackets with voluntary stakeholder-led solutions. But at the same time, having no legislation should not result in no action. So how can we make the world get into action? We got a few answers to that, and we picked out 6 of them. The first was what people said: create the business case. Because if you have a business case, that means that organizations will make money of more secure solutions in their product, services, and devices. But how do you create actually a big business case? Because at this moment, there is none. The main answer people pointed at was drive demand. And we can drive the demand through procurement, through the purchase of products by individuals, where the security is demanded from the manufacturer or developer. Other points that people pointed to were forms of societal or peer pressure. So you could think of consumer organizations around the globe. When they test a product, they don't just look how good the refrigerator or the coffee machine or the car works, but also test the security of the ICT that now is in all these appliances. So if that comes up with the red dots and not with green ones, that means that there's societal pressure, because people will start asking questions. The dark side is testing our ICT 24/7 a day on a global level. So why is this not organized at the society side, at the good side. Why don't we stimulate a testing program from around the world where vulnerabilities are reported and that companies know that their product is flawed? We could look at existing regulatory options. So what could regulators currently do when they have tools like duty of care, when they have some sort of technical oversight, or where they have consumer oversight? So in other words, we could do some sort of a regulatory inventory on existing options. The fourth one is to make sure that parliamentarians understand this topic better, that the media understands this topic better, etc. And finally, the sixth one is a better aligned education. Sorry, Mark, I forgot to introduce you. Mark Ravel is present as well. He's a policy advisor to this dynamic coalition. My apologies, Mark, for not putting you, not introducing you at the start. So finally, is a better aligned education, because what people point to as well is that when our youth leaves education, and whether that is at a vocational training level or university, in ICT related tertiary education, that cybersecurity, internet standards, ICT best practices, internet architecture are topics that are almost not present in their curricula. So how can we expect them to work on a more secure internet when they have never learned how to do so? And this is not specific cybersecurity related education, but this is about general ICT related tertiary education. Next slide, please. So where are we at this point in time? The DISA ISSS has 3 current activities and a general activity. We have 3 working groups of which the chairs are present today. The first working group is security by design, and the subgroup Internet of Things. The second one is education and skills. And the third one is procurement and supply chain management and the creation of the business case. All 3 will be presented on short. What we have also as well is a coordination team, being Mark Ravel and myself. What we are responsible for is basically secretarial duties to make sure that all this happens, takes place, is organized, but also that the governance of this group is taken care of, that everybody knows exactly what to expect and that there are rules to play by. We are trying to find funding for this dynamic coalition. We are responsible for the outreach to make sure that we can present at the right places, meet the right people. We are in search of experts who are willing to cooperate with us in this dynamic coalition, and we build the network. And there are a few other topics that I won't bother you with. Next slide, please. So this is the road ahead, and I will come back to that when individual working groups have presented. Is Yuri Kargopolov present? Because then he started. If not, then Janice Richardson of Working Group 2 will start. So Kelvin, that's a question to you.
So I will bring up the slide for Janice.
So thank you, Wout. I'll jump right in so that we save some time. So as you heard, one of the key things is to educate, to skill, so that we can achieve the objectives of making the internet more secure and safer. I'm speaking on behalf of our chair, Raymond Mamata, who wasn't sure if he could make it. Next slide, please. If we look at the World Economic Forum, we see that there are 6 key facts about employment. First of all, people and machines are going to be spending roughly the same amount of time getting the work done. Secondly, the job destruction that we're currently seeing is going to be offset, and we're already seeing this, in fact, by the jobs of tomorrow. What are these? These are data and AI economy, engineering, cloud computing, and product development. Next, well, these are the top priorities for business leaders, this cloud computing, the big data, and the e-commerce. There's been a significant rise in the interest for encryption for non-humanoid robots and artificial intelligence. And now we are in a window of opportunity to reskill those workers, but this window of opportunity is being radically reduced and will be almost non-existent by 2025. So the top skills, according to the World Economic Forum, are critical thinking, analysis, problem solving, self-management, active learning, resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility. So what is the future of jobs by 2025? According to the World Economic, next slide, please. According to the World Economic Forum, there's an acceleration of the digitalization of the work process. And I think that we've really seen this after COVID. Secondly, there are going to be a lot more opportunities to work remotely. Thirdly, acceleration of the automation of tasks. Next, an acceleration of we're going to accelerate the digitalization and the upskilling of workers. And the last one that I think is of interest to us, we have to accelerate the upskilling and reskilling programs before it's too late. Next slide, please. So this, in fact, leads us to the aims of our working group too. We are trying to streamline the transition from school to the workplace in the cyber sector. We're also trying to understand what are the hard skills, what are the soft skills that young people need when they enter the workforce? What are the gaps between what they're getting in tertiary education and what is expected when they jump into the workforce? How do we meet the challenge of these continually emerging cybersecurity threats? And how do we promote the inclusion of cybersecurity, of standards, of internet governance, and of architecture in ICT course curricula? And this is sort of the core of what we are trying to do. Effective internet usage and governance depends largely on the security of the internet, the accountability of the humans leading its evolution, and ensuring a pipeline of qualified cyber experts able to respond to the emerging digital needs and keep that one step ahead of the challenges. Next slide, please. So what are we doing about this? Well, our plan from July to September, but we're actually still going to be here in October, is to broaden our outreach to stakeholders. So those who are listening, if you're interested, please join us. We are trying to conduct interviews with relevant industry and the tertiary sector so that we can enrich the data we're collecting. Then we are going to develop a questionnaire so that we can get input from a much broader public to prioritize the areas of skill shortage and identify good practice. That will lead us in November, December to drafting a working document that we can disseminate, which will show our initial findings and outline potential solutions, and we will have this ready to contribute to the IGF in 2021. Next slide, please. How are we doing this? And here we are asking once again for volunteers. Cybersecurity for us equals better governance plus reliable services plus public trust. We are trying to gather input from business and tertiary leaders to detect and bridge the skill gaps between business expectations and the know-how of tertiary education graduates. We are focusing on technical skills, business and soft skills, and good practice models. And this is why we're asking if you're in a situation where you can give us a little more detail on these aspects, please send us your email address, contact us, we need you. Our output's going to be a survey to reach a broader, more diversified professional public. And in 2022, we are going to create a report which defines the skill gaps, outlines the good practices, and provides replicable solutions to strengthen cybersecurity in the future. Time's running short. I'm just going to skip through the next 3 slides. First, hard skills. What have we seen so far? Next slide, please. What have we seen so far? Back 2 slides, sorry. Hard skills. We're seeing that young people are missing system logic, missing this understanding of architecture, poor transversal skills, poor approach to security, unable to visualize results and actually forecast. Scripting, coding is weak. In terms of knowledge, it seems that cloud technology is little understood. Operating systems is still a poor area, and network protocols. The approach needs to be strategic. We need to break down those silos, build bridges, take a constructivist approach. It appears, according to business, that young people are really lacking that political plus technical plus legal mindset that's necessary, and also the capacity to really manage projects. As you can see along the top line, we are trying to understand what is the priority level of this for businesses. Should this be learnt pre-tertiary, or should it be learnt at the tertiary level, and what is the current prevalence of this skill? Next, the soft skills, next slide. And the soft skills we see, and the World Economic Forum actually underlines these soft skills: initiative, agility, flexibility, also ethical expertise, responsibility, and I mentioned accountability earlier, open-mindedness, the capacity to see the big picture. Holistic thinkers are needed here. People able to see connections, solve problems, be team players, but also be able to communicate correctly verbally and also in reports. Apparently, this is a real skill that businesses feel is lacking in young people. And finally, what are the solutions? Next slide, please. We looked at some interesting solutions, for example, in Denmark, where national groups are working together to build a sort of a hub to understand how they can better work with the tertiary sector. The aim being, of course, to improve cooperation from universities and have bridging programs. We're also looking at national regional cyber hubs to expand learning tracks. We're looking at how you improve the two-way learning between companies and employees, because companies do insist that when they have young employees come in, they expect innovative ideas. They think that young people should also be bringing something to drive the company forward. Last slide, please. What are our next steps? Well, one, we want to broaden our stakeholder base, as I've said twice, to enrich interviews and therefore the survey that will result from us. We want to gather and analyze the data we get, compare our findings with the work that's going on in Working Group 1 and 3, document these findings, and finally, replicate those solutions so that we can really strengthen the integration of internet standards and ensure that internet becomes more secure and safer. Thank you.
Now Mallory, I think you're up next. Thank you.
Sure, I'll jump right in. So hi everyone, I'm Mallory Nodal. Currently work as the Chief Technology Officer for the Center for Democracy and Technology. I'm in Washington, DC right now. It's very late in the evening for me, so I apologize for my low energy level. And I also am a consultant, writer, researcher in the internet freedom fields, typically from a civil society perspective. And I have as well a basis in the technical community. I'm a co-chair of the Human Rights Protocol Considerations Research Group of the Internet Research Task Force, a sister organization, the Internet Engineering Task Force. And so I've helped the DCISSS to develop its third working group, which focuses on procurement and business models. So it fits into the broader theory of change, as Wout explained, and Janice has presented another of those, education and skills working group. So this working group, the third area of work, envisions the development of policy recommendations, such as on the procurement of digital technologies. So we focus in on this notion of procurement because, as Wout said, it helps to create a business case by increasing demand for more secure and safer products. We are taking into account the internet and security safety requirements that would be included in procurement training, or the actual policies that people will follow. But before we begin actually developing what those policies are, it's really important for us to consider and do a proper mapping of what already exists and what would be, actually a meaningful contribution to this space. Of course, then to ensure that it has influence and that the outcomes of our key policy recommendations will actually land and change the outcome. So I'll speak a little bit about the theory of change, the outcome, the three objectives we have, and then the planned activities under those. The timeline for this work hasn't yet begun because we are also just hoping to have some support for this work. I really enjoy working with sort of diverse and decentralized research projects. There are a lot of experts in the internet governance forum at large, and as well as at the global level, we also then have regional experts, such as those of you attending this conference. So we'd like to leverage those eventually to work on this project together. So the outcome of the working group is to meet global internet security standards such that it's a ubiquitous baseline requirement in any public or private sector procurement or supply chain management policy. So we want them to be ubiquitous and sort of a best practice, essentially. The objectives that we have then for the work to achieve that are to actually get a full scope of the security standards and procurement challenges and also opportunities that exist right now. The second piece then, after we build upon that, which would essentially be desk research, maybe with a little bit of qualitative in that, the second phase would then be to develop from that mapping some really relevant and actionable guidance that requires security standards and procurement policies and supply chain management policies. Now, once we have the guidance, once we have those sort of policy recommendations, then the work becomes actually influencing then the public and private sector to actually implement those suggested policies. So it sort of comes back around that the sort of scoping that we've done in the beginning helps us figure out then where to turn to make sure that these policy recommendations have proper impact. So the activities then, you can imagine, involved in each of those stages. When we're doing the scoping and mapping in the first stage, we're essentially conducting basic desk research to answer the research question, what has been done by others to achieve our outcome already? What work is ongoing? We would want to then, within that as well, develop a decision matrix to narrow our focus on the most impactful global institutions, and also to leverage the UN IGF sphere of influence. So why is this work being done in the global IGF as opposed to the many other global internet governance mechanisms out there? We want to then make sure that our focus of the working group is really well placed and takes that sphere of influence into consideration. And then the last thing that we would do as part of the first phase of the scoping and mapping would be that just to collect and document the existing procurement and supply chain policies of those most impactful institutions. Definitely keep track of who we talk to keep those contacts for later in our process when we want to circle back around and help disseminate our work. So then, yes, once we have collected and documented those existing procurements, we would probably then move into the second phase. Our work plan at the moment says that we will do things like creating a short survey that we would aim directly at decision makers on the challenges and opportunities that they are facing in shifting policies and essentially like organizational behavior change, right? We would then want to identify areas to improve the existing supply chain management. So where are areas of improvement, where are gaps? Can we get more specific without, being irrelevant to a sort of global audience? And then we would develop some kind of guidance. Now it could be a checklist, it could be an issue paper, it could actually be all of these things. But we would want to make them fit for purpose, especially because, again, we're trying to narrow on sort of the most influential global institutions within, the IGF sphere of influence. And then lastly, of course, we need to circle back to all those who have hopefully come along with us as part of this research, those who've responded to our surveys, those who we cited in our desk research, to then help us disseminate that guidance and present it, be able to take feedback and reviews to improve it, and essentially circle around probably in the 2022 or 2023 IGF cycle, where we've got the national, regional, and global event, which could be a very, very useful venues for disseminating this work. I think that that's all I wanted to talk about. I'm of course very happy to answer any questions, but thanks very much.
Thank you, Melanie. Next up would be Yuri Kargopolov, but I just received a message that there's some emergency at his work, so that he could not join. But Mark Carvel, the policy lead, will fill in for him, but please excuse him that it may not be as elaborate as we had hoped. So Mark, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Wout. I'll see what I can do. First of all, it was identified in the preparation for this dynamic coalition that security by design was an important area of focus with regard to internet security. I know from my experience previously working for the UK government, this was a key policy objective area. So the dynamic coalition, after we launched a year or so ago, decided that we would establish a work track on security by design. And that's, of course, potentially a very wide scope of work. And it was after consultation with stakeholders, we decided that we would select as a first area of focus under the broad heading of security by design, Internet of Things. This is, as we all know, is rapidly evolving as a transformative technology that's going to impact everybody's lives, that will bring about new economic opportunity, new opportunities for business, and so on, with everything being connected. And so we established a working group to look at the Internet of Things, and Yuri from Ukraine is the chair of that. And the working group has been meeting. Its basic mission is to look at the gaps in the architecture of IoT cybersecurity and the range of competing protocols. That was a very obvious feature of the IoT landscape that was discussed. So looking at the existing architecture of IoT and how security specifications are being developed in IoT devices. Are they being developed at all? Are they sufficiently robust to be give assurance to users of IoT devices and related applications that there was inbuilt security? So is there sufficient coverage of security in IoT devices? And then thirdly, another sort of topic that emerged for the work on IoT related to identification management and the need for a basic, what's described as a basic trust model. So the work is underway. They've been doing an initial phase of review of existing initiatives, what's going on, existing analysis, academic reports, work being done in the ITU and elsewhere, what's happening. What is the experience with deployment of security-related standards in the whole area of IoT? So surveying experience of that. And what are the expectations that people have for security relating to IoT? So the working group has been looking at these issues and collating their materials and so on. They decided fairly recently to initiate a stakeholder questionnaire, which is now being finalized, and that will be issued shortly. We're looking at who to send it to, but clearly those government administrations who are looking at this will be important. Also, people like the Internet Society. And in fact, Yuri, we're fortunate in having Yuri as the chair of this group because he's also the chair of the special interest group of the Internet Society, ISOC, looking at IoT. So, what is the ISOC doing in this area, their progress and so on, and also what other regional authorities, administrations and stakeholder groups are doing. So we're looking at identifying contacts to issue the questionnaire survey. And once all the responses to that survey are in, a report will issue, and that will be presented, or initial findings, if we're in time, at the DCISSS session at the IGF in Katowice in December. So that's broadly the state of play with regard to this working group. As I say, I'm not deep in the detail, as Bout said, I'm not deep in the detail, but we can certainly pick up any questions you raise and consult with Yuri and his colleagues to follow up on that. So if you have questions and comments, please do put them in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll pick them up. I think I'll stop there now, Bout, if I've covered the essentials. But please, maybe you have one or two extra points drawing on your experience to add to what I've said. Thank you.
I think you've covered it quite nicely, Mark, and thank you for stepping in at such a late moment. Kelvin, if I could go back to my presentation, slide 8, then we will wrap up and go to the Q&A. As I showed already before I introduced that, please, the previous slide still, please. Number 8, yes, thank you. At the road ahead, I showed it to you, but I didn't comment on it. I think that what you heard from the 3 working groups is that we are extremely output driven, and our outcomes will take on a few very different sides. So first of all, there will be public recommendations for public and private decision takers for both. So there will be very clear cut what are the best practices around the world, and if you follow these, then you will probably set a very decisive step in the right direction. But we also want to provide some guidance and toolkits for practitioners. So just stick with one example. You want a new website. That's maybe the most easiest example to give. If you follow the OWASP top 10, then you have taken care of most problems. But you will have to find a website developer who knows how to work with those OWASP top 10 guidance and toolkit, or find a platform that has them in place. Because if you find a platform that is insecure, then your whole website will be insecure. So that's something to take into account when you procure a website. Finally, there will be outreach programs, as Mallory already explained, what we will be trying to do, and as Janice explained. But next to that, we also aim to have capacity building programs. And we are already discussing these options before we have results with organizations like the Global Forum of Cyber Expertise, with the Internet Governance Forum itself that is developing some sort of a capacity building program for 2022 and beyond, and with the African Union. So in other words, globally, organizations are extremely interested in what we are going to produce. And then there will be a next phase, which is to be determined, because as you say, we need content first, which we are working on to organize currently. And this is foreseen for the years 2022 and 2023, and perhaps even beyond if we start developing other topics that are underdeveloped currently. Next slide, please. So the road ahead. We are in need of assistance and of help of experts that can actually work with us, are willing to work with us to make sure that we will develop the best practices available. So help us to achieve our aim of developing practical solutions to make the internet more secure and safer. At this point in time, we have lost the vice chair from Asia. So Asia is no longer present really in this dynamic coalition. And we're looking for a vice chair from Asia to step into working group 3 and assist Mallory with all the actions that need to be taken. But also we are sort of underdeveloped in Asia in general, where we have extremely good representation in Africa, where some people are very active in working with the dynamic coalition. This is presently not the case in Asia. And we are more than willing to make sure that the working hours of the dynamic coalition will alternate towards Asia to make it more practical to participate. So that is a final call for help. There's also a call for financial support so that we can do the research, so that we can lead this dynamic coalition in a professional way and not be totally dependent on volunteers, because with the level of research that we have to undertake and the level of outreach, this is not a voluntary undertaking. This is something that affects the whole world and will make the world more secure and safer as once these programs are going to be rolled out in the future. So for that, I thank you for your attention. And are there any questions? And please, the final slide so people can see how they can reach us, Kelvin. So this is our page at the IGF. We will have a website of our own in the near future. This is being developed with help from Africa. And you can join at this list to make sure that you receive the information, and you can contact us at this email address of the DCISSS. So please, anybody who has questions, the floor is open. And I think there are one or two in the chat. Mark, can you moderate that, please?
Yes, thank you, Wout. A couple of comments indeed in the chat and questions. First of all, Jean Carrault, and this is a comment or piece of information for Janice in particular with regard to education and training and so on, and skilling up on security. He mentions the Tech Up initiative, and this, which is focused on programmers in particular, as the area of focus, and he's provided a link in the chat. So Janice, if you want to mention that. I don't think Jean is able to speak further about it, but he comments really that the focus on programmers is because this initiative sees the next generation of rights defenders being programmers. Jean also asked about Working Group 1 and security by design, whether that encompassed rights by design. Now, I don't know if you want to comment further on this, but we're coming at this whole area of security and safety from the perspective of deployment of security related standards. So my response to that is that we're cognizant of the whole relevance of rights and access and the importance of being able to be online safely and so on, but it's not the primary focus. But Wout, do you want to react on that? Security by design in the technologies and the whole issue of rights.
Yes, well, I think I can only echo what you say, Mark. That we are here to look at the security by design in this particular working group, and look at it from a technical solution point of view. But by building in security, rights and privacy are obviously better protected from that moment onward. There are already initiatives within the IGF framework on access and human rights, so that if we would take that on, we would be duplicating other initiatives. But what we are very cognizant of is that we always have to be working together where necessary. So we are reaching out to other platforms within the IGF, but also beyond, as you can see today, because we are the regional IGF. But this afternoon, for example, we'll be speaking to the European Commission Working Group on Internet Standard Deployment, where we are invited to present. So in other words, we are connecting to as many platforms as possible and relevant platforms as possible, so that we can actually assist each other in becoming better and learn from each other where necessary. So I think that is the best answer I can give at this point in time.
Okay, Janice, did you want to say anything about Tech Up? Are you aware of Tech Up?
No, I wasn't aware of Tech Up, and I have taken note, and it would be really great if Jean could get in contact with us. In terms of rights, yes, I'd like to say a lot about it, because actually in the 90s, I was a lecturer at the Sorbonne University on this very topic, computing rights, information systems, how they are all together and have to be accepted as one. Also, you'll notice in the skills that employers have already picked up as lacking in young people, ethics and an ethical understanding is underlined. And I think that this also relates to rights. But how many of us really understand our rights on the internet and our responsibilities that go with it? That's another big question that I continually ask at the tertiary level and find there are very few responses. I did want to come in also on the question about hackers, if I may, because yes, we know that hackathons are very important ways that we can all come together and push innovation. So, and we also know that banks very often find the hackers, find the swindlers, so that they can help build more resilient systems. It's an important aspect. that I think we can learn a lot from hackers and need to keep learning a lot from hackers. I'm not encouraging it, but this is one way that young people experiment, and we'd love to know more about how to turn these hackers towards rights and security.
Okay, thanks, Jess. That's responding to Mokaberi's comment or question, kind of a very fundamental one. Is it true that some tech companies and social media are founded by hackers? What should be done about this issue? Wout, did you want to comment on that as well before we pick up Visharad's question earlier? But do you want to comment on back to following Janice's comment responding to Macaberi?
Very closely, very shortly. I think that yes, I think many companies are founded by hackers. For example, I think most cybersecurity companies are founded by usually boys that were hacking whatever in their little attics at their parents' place, and from there started their companies because they saw that it was a societal need for them. A colleague I worked with very closely in the Zeros, in the spam enforcement agency where I was working then, started as a hacker, arrested by the police, and 2 months later, at 16-year age, hired by the police to assist them with their work. So in other words, this is a boy who was being very naughty and found a job with the police and later with us. So there are positive hackers, but we can also probably say that some major hacking and ransomware organizations are somehow companies as well, with services and all, only making money in a way that we are not really agreeing on as a society. So I think for both there will be something to say. Thank you, Mark.
Visharad says Mark Zuckerberg started as a hacker. I didn't know that, but anyway. Okay, he asked earlier on a very, very general question. This is Visharad from Fiji, how does hardware play a role when it comes to security? How do you react to that question, Wout? How does hardware play a role? Big question.
I am not an expert, so I'm not really daring to give an answer here, but I understand that hardware can be abused as well. But that's as far as I dare to go.
Okay.
But in general, what we will be looking at where IoT is concerned, that we will usually be focusing on the software component within the IoT, and that there may be a million vulnerabilities around the world, but the most easy way to make sure that not every IoT device is hackable is when in the software there's built in a system that closes the door. And that would mean that to access a camera or a fridge or the fish tank within a company becomes a lot harder because you can't just access it. And that is probably the most easiest standard that we will have to agree upon on a global level very soon. I see a comment from Jean or Jean. I don't know how to pronounce correctly.
Jean, yeah.
Jean.
Shall I relay that? Yeah.
Yes.
He just on his following up his question about rights by design, as he calls it. He argues that rights by design primes over security by design. I think meaning it's a context for security by design, in the sense that having technology that is built compliant to the local jurisdiction will include security and privacy, should that jurisdiction respect it. In other words, he feels, this is for Tech Up, I guess, security by design is a component of a broader rights by design concept. Shall we go to Ying Chu Tian's question, which is about a specific... Sorry about
you. See one above it from Mokaberi on hackers really contribute to security by design. And I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
There are 5 minutes left, so I think we can use get all the questions. I think that
Just
can hackers
Ying
really
Chu's
contribute?
question. Shall we read it out? Ying Chu's question.
Yes.
Does
I wanted to
IEEE...
do one. Sorry, Mark. I wanted to do one above it from Mokaberi about hackers, and then go to Ying Chu. So, can hackers really contribute to security by design? And my answer is yes, because if so-called white hat hackers would be organized, and this is an idea written by Mark Goodman, I think over 5 or 6, 7 years ago in his book on cybersecurity. If hackers around the world that are willing to work with companies and governments, and they are sort of organized on a global level to actually look into security issues, and there is a reporting place in the world where they can report the vulnerabilities to, it would mean that they would actually be contributing to security by design or to security after the design. And that would mean that all the vulnerabilities the dark side uses would disappear, because companies already know about them and they can start work to give and provide updates to the world. And that could be organized when developing the software. If you organize hackers within your software development, it would change. But if you ask people to test, a good example is that the city of The Hague this week, in the cybersecurity week of the Netherlands, asks about 100 hackers to come to The Hague and start hacking all their systems. And they do it on a yearly basis. And the one who finds the most vulnerabilities gets a prize. So in other words, that is something you can organize to make yourself as a city or a company much safer. So Thank you, Mark.
Testing. Okay, so we're down to about 2 minutes now. So let's just quickly fit in Ying Chu's question. Does IEEE 7000 2021 standard addressing ethical concerns during systems design impact on the education of engineers? Are you familiar with that standard, Wout? Or
no.
Anybody else want to comment? Or shall we take that one away?
No, we don't take it away. I think that this is exactly why we need experts, because you and I, Mark, are not the expert. We need experts that help us with these sort of the translation.
I mean, take it away in terms of noted for future examinations.
Of course, but we need the experts to help us with defining these standards and make sure that we take them on board. I think
Ying Chu's provided a link. I see a clock ticking down for me. 1 minute now, 45.
Okay, I only see my slide, so I think that it's best to wind up.
Wind up. Yeah, okay. We'll note all the other comments, and thank you very much, everybody.
And thank you, Mark, for moderating. Sorry for stepping in, but we're running out of time. The invitation that we try to extend today basically is that we ask you to join, because we need expertise, seen from questions that we received on the rights and versus security on specific standards, that we need the expertise to help us define the best practice. And once we have that best practice, we can translate that into the toolkits, in the guidelines. And we want to do this in a neutral way as possible. It's impossible to say the old WASP 10 to come back to the website doesn't work, because it works. So it means it works for everybody around the world. And when we advocate a standard, a best practice like that in that way, and start disseminating it, that will mean that everybody starts using the same sort of standard around the world. And that would help the world tremendously in becoming safer. And that could be for software, it could be for hardware, it could be for devices, etc. So that is what we aim for. We have an invite for us to you to join us and to help us with this work forward. And we need more presence in Asia and the Pacific. So that's also a double invitation to you. As you see at my final slide, that is where you can reach us. That's where you can learn more. And with that, I thank you very much for your attendance and listening to the Dynamic Coalition on Internet Standards, Security and Safety. And that I thank my chairs, vice chairs, and Mark as the lead policy to be present and present here, and Melody, especially this very late hour for you. So I hope to see you within the DCI ISSS very soon. And with that, I close the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Walt, and speakers.
Kevin, as a question, do we get the comments from the Zoom, or is that automatically downloaded to my computer?
We can send that to you if you don't get it automatically.
Okay, then I will let Christine know, and if it downloads, then it's fine, and if not, I have I'll notify. Thank you.
Sure, no, that will be it. Okay.
And thank you very much for assisting us in the background.
My pleasure. Have a good day or good evening, everybody.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.